We never thought he would, but 7 long years later we can officially say, he's back! Hello everyone, and welcome to Rewind Reviews. In this slightly overdue video, I'm going to be taking a look at one of my other most anticipated movies of 2024, and that is Deadpool and Wolverine. Released in 2024 and based on the characters from Marvel Comics, Deadpool and Wolverine sees a listless Wade Wilson toiling away in civilian life, with his days as the morally flexible merc with the mouth, Deadpool, behind him. But when his homeworld faces an existential threat, Wade must reluctantly suit up once again with an even more reluctant Wolverine. This time directed by Sean Levy, who co-writes alongside Ryan Reynolds, Rhett Reese, Paul Wernick and Zeb Wells. This addition to the MCU's Multiverse saga stars Ryan Reynolds, Hugh Jackman, Emma Corrin, Matthew McFadden, Marina Baccarin, Leslie Uggams, Rob Delaney, Tyler Mane and Aaron Stanford. It may come as no shock to absolutely anybody that I was genuinely looking forward to this one. This is the first MCU property that I have been genuinely excited for since Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And it wasn't just me, the buzz surrounding this movie was absolutely everywhere. It's the first Marvel Cinematic Universe movie to be rated an R in the US. It's a continuation of the Deadpool movies, which we never thought was going to happen. It deals with the multiverse, and it was going to be lots of little multiversal shenanigans, so we could probably expect things like cameos and references and all sorts. And of course, the one and only Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine in the classic yellow and blue suit as well. It's a pretty big deal, this movie, and there is a lot riding on it as well, especially with Marvel Studios being in this really weird place right now with lots of stuff going on behind the scenes. I'm still waiting for that Blade movie, Feige. So while there was a lot of hype surrounding this movie, there was definitely some skepticism as well. So I am quite happy to report that not only did this movie meet the expectations that I had for it, it is genuinely good. The story this time sees Wade Wilson now retired and working as a used car salesman. But when he's brought in by the TVA to become a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Wade discovers that his homeworld is under threat of extinction. So he decides to recruit a new variant of Wolverine to help prevent that. In the same way that the story was handled in the first 2 Deadpool movies, the plot for this movie is kept relatively simple. That being said, the concepts and ideas that they do introduce and explore in this movie are definitely a lot bigger. The film is definitely the biggest installment within the Deadpool trilogy, but not only that, I think it's one of the biggest movies within the X-Men films as well. But even so, even with all the really crazy over-the-top concepts and ideas, this movie is not complicated at all, and it is quite easy to follow. I have seen some complaints regarding the simplicity of the story, and while I kind of agree and I do get where it is that they are coming from, it is basically what it was that I expected. It's a Deadpool movie where he, dragging Wolverine along with him, explores the multiverse and tries to save his world, which isn't really too different from what it was that he got up to in the first 2 movies, where the first movie was all about him getting revenge, and the second movie was all about him just trying to save someone. They're all very simple stories, but the focus is on action, comedy, and the characters. So I don't really understand what else people were expecting to happen in this. You get the movie that you are expecting this to be, and it is a load of fun. It plays around with its ideas and concepts in a really fun way, while still being anchored down by an emotional backbone. And in terms of this being a multiverse story based on a comic book IP, this is easily one of the better ones. The multiverse itself is handled really well. It's not just an excuse or gimmick to bring in a load of cameos and feature a load of nostalgic things. It actually does service the plot. It addresses Deadpool's place within the MCU. It introduces a load of concepts that are probably going to come into play in Doomsday or Secret Wars. Plus, yes, it is absolutely an excuse to bring Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. And you needn't fear about Wolverine's return in this. How he's been handled in this movie is really good and really entertaining. It's surprisingly quite emotional with lots of heart and emotion, and I did find myself getting invested. Yes, it does address and it does acknowledge what happened in the movie Logan, but it does leave that story alone. It doesn't undo anything. It doesn't alter the story whatsoever. The Logan that appears in this movie is a completely different variant. Both Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman were very open about that back when they first announced this movie, so please do not worry about this movie potentially tarnishing the legacy of Logan. It does have some fun in a very Deadpool way, which I don't think that everyone's going to like, but I absolutely loved it. Although I was annoyed about one thing and one thing only, but I'll talk about that in my spoiler video. Yes, I'm actually doing one of them. Yes, the film itself does have a fairly thin plot, and I do think that it could have done with a little bit of extra padding here and there, especially when it comes to the villains. But the story itself is a load of fun, and it's just right for this kind of movie. I know there was supposed to be a lot of other stuff that was going to happen in this movie, and a lot of things that were changed and altered and things like that, so I'm expecting that there is probably going to be a lot of rejected ideas and deleted or extended scenes. I highly doubt there's going to be an extended cut or anything like that for this movie, because Marvel Studios don't really do that. I know No Way Home does have the more fun stuff edition, but that was a Sony movie, so it doesn't really count. But I do hope that any deleted or extended scenes are released either on Disney Plus or on the home release. But outside of that, I really enjoyed this movie, and a large part of that is down to the characters. Most of the characters that appear in this are returning characters from the Deadpool movies, like Peter, Colossus, Vanessa, Dopinder, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Yukio, and Blind Owl. Except for Cable and Domino for some reason. I'm a little bit disappointed about that. But it is really nice getting to see these characters and these actors making a return, even if they don't really have that much to do, apart from Peter, played by Rob Delaney. But that being said, they are not the main focus of this story, so it does make sense. No, this movie belongs to the Merc with the Mouth himself, Deadpool, once again played by Ryan Reynolds. I think Ryan Reynolds, in the same way that Hugh Jackman has with Wolverine, has pretty much cemented himself in this role. I don't think anyone will disagree with me when I say he basically is Deadpool at this point, and I cannot picture anyone else in that suit. His performance is brilliant as always, being really sarcastic, witty, funny, viciously violent, and as irreverent as always. But like the previous films, what drives him and his connection to his loved ones really helps ground him and strikes a good balance between his comedy and his dramatic scenes. I will say I do think they maybe pushed it a little bit further than they probably should have with regards to how seriously he takes things, but I do think it is balanced out quite well considering how serious Wolverine is. Logan does quite rightfully call him out on a few things that he does do throughout this movie, some pretty messed up things, which was still quite funny though. The only thing that I wasn't on board with when it comes to Deadpool's character in this movie is what's happened between Wade and Vanessa, played by Marina Baccarin, especially considering everything that they've been throughout the past two movies. It does make sense thematically, and it does give Wade a little bit of a push to get back in the suit, but I don't think it was necessary. I mean, Zeb Wells is one of the writers on this movie, so it's not exactly unexpected. Don't read his Spider-Man run. Anyway, that aside, I really did enjoy what it is that he gets up to in this movie, and I think that Ryan Reynolds is absolutely perfect once again. I love what it is they've done with his suit this time too. It's a lot brighter, colourful, sleeker. It's not as gritty as the previous suits that he wore in Deadpool 1 and 2. I'm a little surprised it's even in such good nick by the end of the movie, considering just how many times he gets slashed, stabbed, shot and all sorts throughout this movie. And the same goes for Wolverine as well, but just go with it. I love his new katana blades as well. They're all made out of adamantium. There's little bits of gold on them as well, and the little Deadpool logo on the handle. Apparently there's even a reference to the Golden Girls on the bottom of the hilt. I also love the thing they've inscribed on the nozzles of both of his pistols, which say "Smile and wait for the flash." I don't know if that was in previous movies or not, but this was the first time that I actually did spot it, and it did make me laugh when I saw it. I mean, it definitely helped having some close-ups of it, but anyway. I also think the makeup and hair department have done a really good job with this movie as well, especially when it comes to Wade Wilson himself whenever he isn't wearing his costume. And I actually quite like that subtle little detail that he actually wears a toupee quite early on in the film, but when the TVA show up, they actually take it off him and they absolutely rip it off his head. And the thing is, Deadpool actually uses staples to keep it attached, so when the toupee gets taken off, the staples are still stuck to his head. And it's like that throughout pretty much the entire film. There's still little tufts of hair. I just thought that was a really fun little detail. The designers in general have absolutely outdone themselves with this movie, especially when it comes to either recreating or creating brand new things or looks for characters. And that, of course, extends to this brand new version of Wolverine. Hugh Jackman is back after 7 long years, and honestly, it's like he never left. As I said, this is a new version of Wolverine that we haven't seen before, so Hugh Jackman's performance is a bit different. And I dare say, it might actually be one of his best to date. This version of Wolverine is broken. He's much more aggressive and short-tempered, his movements are more animalistic, he fights smarter, quicker and more skillfully, he uses his senses a lot more than he has in previous films, and of course, he's in the comic-accurate yellow and blue suit, courtesy of Kevin Feige's one and only request. Hugh is absolutely fantastic in this installment. He does an amazing job, and in my opinion, he gives the best performance out of the entire cast. He was the part of the film that I was most looking forward to seeing, and I think that everyone working on this movie to help bring this version of Wolverine to life absolutely delivered. To be fair, I was quite looking forward to the marketing as well. Wolverine does get a proper story and character arc, just like Deadpool does. Yes, this is very much a Deadpool film. The style, the tone, the comedy, the driving force, it's very much a Deadpool movie. But it does also feel like a Wolverine film too, with his story being darker, more serious, and adding some emotional weight to the film with honestly some amazing dialogue sequences and monologues. My favourite Wolverine sequence in this movie, and possibly my favourite scene of the film, involves him and Deadpool in a Honda Odyssey. I know it's been circulating online pretty much since the movie was released in cinemas, but honestly, it is such a good scene. Every time I see it pop up online, I have to watch it. It is so good. It is so creative. It really hits home. It's such an emotional and powerful monologue that Wolverine gives, and it leads to one of the most creative, inventive, and funny fights of the entire film. I genuinely love where they go with Logan in this movie. I was a little bit disappointed with the backstory that they did give for this version of Wolverine. I was hoping that it was going to be something else and a little bit more traumatic and darker, but I do like how it is handled. Plus, the costume he wears in this is just... I think everyone had the same feeling that we would never get to see Hugh Jackman sporting the classic look, and God, it was worth it. It's so much better without the sleeves. I personally would have left the shoulder pads on, but even so, it looks amazing. I even love that they added the little metal things on the back of his gloves as well. I've no idea what they're called, but I absolutely love the addition of them. Both Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman are absolutely perfect in this. The chemistry and dynamic between Deadpool and Wolverine is exactly what you would expect it to be. I genuinely loved seeing Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and this version of Deadpool working and interacting with each other, and I'm so happy with how it turned out. There is two other characters that do appear in this movie that do feature quite prominently throughout, and the first one is a character called Paradox, played by Matthew McFadden. Paradox is one of the antagonists that poses the biggest threat to Wade's universe. Despite being a part of the TVA, he's the whole reason that the story happens in the first place. He's a little over the top compared to the previous villains in the Deadpool movies, which does make him quite fun. In my opinion, he is one of the funniest MCU villains that we've had so far, but his comedy and performance never overshadows the threat that he does pose, and I did like how the writers handle him and how Matthew portrays him. The other character and the other antagonist is Charles Xavier's twin sister Cassandra Nova, played by Emma Corrin. In my opinion, she doesn't have as much of an impact on the overall story compared to Paradox, but she does become the central antagonist after she's introduced, and she is way more threatening and serious. Cassandra Nova isn't a character that I'm really that familiar with. I have heard her name mentioned before, but I've never actually come across her in any stories. When she was announced as the antagonist of this movie, I did do some research on the character, and actually seeing how it is that she is portrayed in this movie and how it is that they depict her, I'm really surprised how accurate her backstory is. And like her superpowers as well, they're really creepy, and they are directly from the comics. Emma Corrin's performance is brilliant. They are surprisingly quite scary, and they've got this great on-screen presence as well. But despite that, I do think that Cassandra is one of the more forgettable villains in the MCU, which is a bit of a shame because I do like her. I do think that she is a good character with a great motivation and backstory, and she is easily one of the scarier villains that they have had in this franchise. But her motivation does change quite drastically and quite fast towards the end of the movie, which, yes, does make her a much more threatening character, and it does make sense within terms of the story. But I don't think that shift works as well as it could, but that's just me. Outside of that, the performance is great. There's some speckles of comedy, and I love that she still feels quite intimidating and unpredictable. Everyone here in big and small roles do amazing work. And yes, I will be talking about cameos, but I'll save that for my spoiler video. In terms of the overall look of the film, this is probably the most comic booky looking film in the Deadpool trilogy, and probably even the entire X-Men film series too. Obviously, the first two Deadpool movies, along with the entirety of the X-Men film franchise, was pretty grounded and pretty gritty in terms of how the movies felt and the overall tone and aesthetic. But now, with this movie taking place within the MCU and the multiverse being a part of this, we are starting to see a lot more comic book accurate interpretations of these characters, and it's already started happening with things like Beast in the Marvels. We saw that with Professor X in Doctor Strange, and now we're getting that with Wolverine and Deadpool. It now feels like these characters are allowed to embrace their comic book roots, and I absolutely love it. There are some absolutely amazing visuals in this movie with some really creative cinematography and staging. It definitely helps that this film relies on practical work, including the costumes, the makeup, wire work and stunts, the sets and locations, including a gigantic 20th Century Fox statue. Almost nothing is off limits to them when it comes to what jokes they can make in this film. Apparently there was even conversations that they had behind the scenes between Kevin Feige, the producer, the screenwriters and Ryan Reynolds, and some of those conversations and some of the things that they actually did discuss do make it into the film. Anyway, it does still use CGI when and where necessary, and I know that that might scare some people, but fear not. The CG effects in this movie look much better than most of the stuff that we have been seeing in a lot of recent Marvel efforts. Most of the effects work is more relegated to backgrounds and environments, just kind of like enhance what's going on around them and just fill things out a little bit more and add a little bit of detail here and there, especially when it comes to when the characters are in the void. Plus they do use a few CGI doubles every so often, especially when it comes to a stunt that either the actors or the stunt performers aren't able to do. And they don't actually look too bad either, apart from maybe one or two moments. But for the most part, the effects in this movie do look really good. One of the effects that they have used consistently in the Deadpool movies that I have always loved is how they've actually managed to animate Deadpool's eyes, because he has got really expressive eyes, and I feel like that is a large part of the character and being able to empathise and understand him. And I feel like if it was just like a completely leather mask that he was wearing, you wouldn't be able to have that sort of connection with him. So I really, really love the decision that they actually did make to have his eyes be able to do that. And how it's done and all the work that has gone into making that actually look believable is really good. Plus, several characters that appear throughout this do have powers and abilities that you can't do for real. And I think that how they have been adapted into this and how they've been realised is really good, especially characters like Cassandra Nova and her powers. I'd heard prior to seeing this movie that she was going to be a telepath just like her brother Charles Xavier, but every single person who discussed this movie and her character did talk about what her powers were. They didn't actually go into specifics about what it is that she actually does. But one thing that they did consistently keep saying was that what she does is genuinely disgusting. So that got me thinking about what it was that she was going to do to read people's minds in this movie, and for some reason I started thinking of things like Sylar from Heroes, where he does his thing with his finger. Nope, that isn't what Cassandra Nova does, but what she does do in this movie, yeah, is pretty gross. And quite creative as well. And yes, it is a direct translation of her powers from the comic books, and I think that how it's done, how it's been brought to life in this movie is really clever, it's very imaginative, and it's really unsettling as well. It is really good and very imaginative. Now, I'm not going to say what it is that she does or how she reads people's minds, but all I will say is that this definitely will not appear in a 12A movie. This definitely earns its 15 or R rating in the US. To be honest, here in the UK, I am actually a little bit surprised that it actually did manage to get away with being a 15 certificate, because there are some things that do happen in this that are actually quite much. But I suppose because the movie does focus more on the comedy and the action rather than the brutality of it, that's how they're able to get away with the 15 certificate. It doesn't make sense, I know, I have questioned it multiple times over the years, but oh well, it wears that rating like a badge of honour. The characters are just as foul-mouthed and violent as ever. The fights and some of the things that happen are gory and graphic, and it's glorious. I don't think this is as action-packed as the previous films, but it does have some big set pieces and a few little scuffles dotted throughout, and they're all handled incredibly well, with everyone getting stuck in, the stunt performers doing what they do best, and the cinematography helping to liven things up even further. In my opinion, it was always going to be difficult to top the action from Deadpool 2. I mean, it was directed by the same person who directed multiple John Wick movies. But what the team working on this movie have been able to do is just as creative and really imaginative as well. It leans a lot more heavily into comic book territory with a lot more over the top and crazy ideas that do work surprisingly quite well. The prime example being the opening title sequence, which personally I don't think is as good as the title sequence from the first movie, but it's no less fun. It is one of the most entertaining, creative and imaginative sequences in the entire film. It is graphic, it is funny, it is really imaginative, and it's all set to NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye. It helps establish the tone of this movie really well. If you've never seen any of the Deadpool movies before, it gives you a really good, clear indication of what it is that you are going to be getting into. Plus, I love that it actually does pay off a joke that Deadpool made in the music video for Deadpool 2 with Celine Dion. And this scene from X-Men 2.
I don't like uncomfortable silences.
What are you doing?
I wouldn't say that it's my favourite fight scene in the entire movie, and neither is the Old Boy inspired finale fight, which I honestly had this massive smile on my face throughout the entire sequence. No, my favourite action scene in this movie is the one that takes place within the Honda Odyssey. That sequence is amazing. I absolutely loved the action in this movie. I think the action sequences are really fun, really creative and imaginative, and they give you more or less exactly what you want. And that definitely includes the comedy as well. As I said, it does feel like absolutely nothing was off the table when it came to this movie. This is honestly one of the funniest movies that I have seen in 2024. Intentionally funny, by the way. And it's very rare to find any jokes in this movie that don't land or don't hit. Like the previous two Deadpool movies, I don't feel like the jokes really do feel very forced. They do feel very natural to the characters. They do come from the characters. He is breaking the fourth wall, absolutely. So there's a lot of stuff that he does reference that are going on in the real world, behind the scenes at Marvel Studios and 20th Century Fox. But they do still fit the characters and the situations, and they don't overshadow the dramatic stuff. This is a comedy movie first and foremost, and unlike a lot of MCU movies, it knows how to balance both drama and comedy really well. Even if some of the jokes that they come out with are going to be a little dated within the next year or so, it is still a funny movie, and I do think that the majority of the jokes do hit. And to be fair, the same can be said about the first two Deadpool movies as well, and they do very firmly establish in the first movie that even if maybe you don't even understand the references or the jokes that Deadpool is coming out with, he doesn't really care as long as you sort of understand the meaning behind it. This is a genuinely funny movie, and it was such a nice experience seeing this movie on the big screen and actually having people around you actually laughing at the jokes. And of course, no Deadpool movie would be complete without a soundtrack, and this one is okay. The soundtrack this time is composed by Rob Simonson, who's previously worked on things like Ghostbusters Afterlife, The Adam Project, The Whale, and I do like what he has done here. It's not an amazing soundtrack by any means, but I do like the theme he has created for this movie. It's quite quirky and quite playful. And it features a few little cat noises as well to sort of symbolise Wolverine, because why not? Because like when that theme started playing in the movie and you can hear the little cat meows in the background, I kept thinking, is that supposed to be happening or not? It is, and it's a fun little touch. The soundtrack's lively when it needs to be, it's dramatic when it needs to be, and I do think that it is used well. And I do appreciate the odd callback to older movies too. I mean, it's a shame we never got like an official Deadpool theme that actually does appear throughout all three Deadpool movies. I mean, technically, I think you could say that the Deadpool rap from the first movie, which did appear in the credits for Deadpool 2, is kind of Deadpool's theme. And unfortunately, it's not actually featured in this one. And in that regard, yeah, it is a little bit disappointing, because that is a really fun song that they did create for the first movie. And they created the Juggernaut theme for the second film as well, which I thought was really absolutely hilarious. So I was kind of hoping that they would do something similar for this movie between Deadpool and Wolverine. I think that that could have been a really fun, quirky theme that they could have introduced, but they don't do that, and I did find that a little disappointing. But as I said, overall, I do think the soundtrack is good for what it is, and I do think that it is suitable. I love the song choices though. I mean, some of them are a little bit odd when they are actually used, but I do think the ones they did pick are great. And a lot of them really do suit the scenes that they are used in. There's songs from NSYNC, as I've already said. There's songs from Avril Lavigne, from Madonna, from Fergie, from the Goo Goo Dolls, and even Huey Lewis and the News. There is some really good stuff in this one, and I did like what they picked. There is one other song that does appear in this that I would like to mention, but just in case you haven't seen the track listing for this movie, I'll save that for my spoiler video. But overall, I do think the soundtrack for this movie is good. The musical soundtrack from Rob Simonson is good when it counts, and I did like it overall. The songs are excellent. I loved how most of them are used. Some of them, yes, are a little bit odd when they actually do pop up, but I did like this soundtrack overall. The soundtrack is definitely worth having a listen to if you get the chance. Overall, I really enjoyed this one. It's not the best Deadpool movie. In my opinion, it's not the best movie of Phase 5, and I don't think that this is the film that will save Marvel. But I did have a great time with it. It's got a very fun, basic, and very Deadpool plot with a ton of callbacks, references, fan service, and surprises. Both Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman are on top form, giving pitch-perfect performances once again, and their natural chemistry and camaraderie really shines through. I like the other characters, but they aren't the most memorable despite having some really great scenes. It's fast-paced, manages to do a lot, is edited well with some really good and creative cinematography. The action is amazing, graphic, imaginative, and staged incredibly well. The costumes, designs, locations, and sets are brilliant and look fantastic on screen. The effects honestly look pretty good, but they could have done with a little touch-up here and there. The music I liked, the soundtrack fits well, but it's not the most memorable despite featuring a few callbacks to older films, but the song choices are excellent. I loved what they used, even if they don't always match up what's happening on screen. I do think that non-Marvel fans and people who don't follow either the films or the Disney Plus shows will struggle with certain aspects of this. It's a very fan-oriented film, so casual viewers, I think we'll have fun with it and they will enjoy it as it is, but there's no denying that fans and long-time Marvel followers will get a load more out of this. I would definitely recommend checking this movie out though. It's a load of fun and it's definitely among the best entries of the recent MCU offerings. And seeing how well the movie's done at the box office right now, most of you probably have. I really enjoyed it. It met my expectations, gave me what I wanted and much more. I had a blast with it and I can't wait to see it again. So with all that being said, my rating for Deadpool and Wolverine is an 8 out of 10. Well, I think that is everything I want to say for this video, so if you have watched this video, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy this content, please like, subscribe, and be sure to hit that notification button. If you have seen Deadpool and Wolverine, let me know down in the comments what you think about it and which movie in the Deadpool trilogy is your favourite. Plus, if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you would like to see me do or recommendations, let me know down below. And make sure you keep an eye out for my spoiler talk on this movie. There's a lot that I want to talk about. It won't be the next video out, but I'll try and get it out as soon as possible after that. But until then, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. See you guys.